mining. It's unfortunate, really. Because when you hear the word, you kind of think of those folks in the holla, you know, digging up coal in Appalachia, pickaxes all smudge-faced, or even worse, those poor souls digging cobalt out of the side of a mountain in the Congo for our iPhones. And Bitcoin mining's nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. It's no Valhalla, don't get me wrong. It's not exactly pretty. It's a big, buzzy, noisy computer stack running an algorithm a gazillion times a second, gobbling up energy. Now, man, I think it's worth it. And I have grow more amazed at the protocol every day. But it's complicated. And so I'm going to let Grok do some of the basics. Bitcoin mining is like solving a super hard math puzzle on a computer to help keep the Bitcoin network running. People called miners use special computers to do tons of calculations, and when they solve this puzzle, they get rewarded with new Bitcoins, aka the block reward. It's a way to create new Bitcoins and make sure all Bitcoin transactions are safe and legit. How does it work? The Bitcoin network. Bitcoin is a digital money system that runs on a global network of computers. Instead of a bank, everybody's transactions, like sending a Bitcoin to a friend, are recorded on a public ledger called the blockchain. The puzzle. Every 10 minutes or so, miners compete to solve a math problem called a hash. This involves using powerful computers called ASICs to guide billions of answers super fast until one works. The problem is based on the SHA-256 algorithm, a special code that scrambles data in a unique way. Solving the puzzle. When a miner's computer finds the right answer, it creates a new block, a group of recent Bitcoin transactions. This block gets added to the blockchain like a new page in a ledger. The reward. Aha. The miner who solves the puzzle gets a reward. Some brand new Bitcoin, as of 2025, about 3.125 Bitcoins per block, worth thousands of dollars, actually worth quite a bit more than that, several $100,000, plus small fees from the transactions in the block. We'll get back to that later. All right, keeping it secure. The puzzle is hard to solve, but easy for others to check. This makes it tough for anyone to cheat or mess with the blockchain, keeping Bitcoin secure. What's the purpose? Create new Bitcoins. Mining is how new Bitcoins are made. There's a limit, 21 million Bitcoins in total, and mining slowly releases them until around 2140, when no more will be created. Number 2, secure the network. Miners verify and record transactions, making sure no one can fake or double spend Bitcoins. This keeps the system trustworthy without needing a central authority like a bank. Decentralization. Asterisk, because there's some controversy about mining and centralization right now, but that's for another talk. We're just laying the groundwork. Decentralization. Mining lets anyone with the right equipment join the network, spread control across the world, so no single person or company runs Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin mining gives you network decentralization, at least in theory, massive computing power in the form of ASICs, which takes a tremendous amount of energy, and builds the batches of transactions that will ultimately wind up on the immutable ledger of the Bitcoin blockchain. And it does it by taking these guesses, by doing this computing at an astronomically fast pace. Individual ASIC chips in 2025 typically perform between 1 and 5 gigahashes. That's 1 to 5 billion hashes per second. And turns out to do that, well, and let's not forget that there's somewhere between 4 and 8 million mining rigs strategically placed around the world. I mean, you could literally take out 3 of the biggest miners in America, China, and Russia, and there would still be millions of computers mining. So, being difficult secures the network. It assures consensus and propagates the blockchain. And those are easy to see even for a noob like me. But what's a little murkier, I think, is a theory that I just can't shake. I think that Bitcoin mining is about to launch America back into the stratosphere of energy production. I think Bitcoin mining will be at the base of 3 of the largest economic forces the world has ever seen. And Bitcoin, believe it or not, is only one of them. Okay, so I want to take a step back and sort of tell my personal Bitcoin mining story. We're going to go back to sort of the early spring, April, May of 2021, sort of the tail end of COVID. And there's all this money injected into the world through the printing. Inflation's running pretty hot. Bitcoin has just rocketed from somewhere in the teens to up past 50. I don't know if it made that top all the way to 60 yet. I feel like it didn't. But at that point, I sort of bought in. Somewhere in there, I bought our first sats. I set up a recurring buy and put in place a multi-sig solution. But like many eager Bitcoiners new to the space, at some point into stacking sats somewhere in that spring of 2021, I had a brilliant idea. There were rumors swirling around about a big shift in the game from China. They banned Bitcoin mining, and it sets up perfectly. So now I need to come up with some extra cash in order to pull off this build in the mountains. And while this temporary dip down to 50,000 in the spring of 2021 was annoying, I was convinced in my brain that I found something better than Bitcoin that somehow involved Bitcoin, and that thing was Bitcoin mining. Here I am, enthralled with the idea of this uncensorable, perfect base layer money, proof of work protocol, diving down the rabbit hole. And how does it get produced? How does it get made? Where do you get your new Bitcoins from? The Bitcoin miners. With China banning mining, here's this opportunity. Here's this grand opportunity that I'm not just taking. That's, I believe some of the Chinese were putting miners on planes and flying them over to Texas. Okay, now do a little research and find out that Texas has a little something called ERCOT. Texas ERCOT is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. ERCOT manages 90% of Texas's electric grid, serving over 26 million customers, and highly relevant to Bitcoin mining due to its low cost electricity and unique grid structure. Texas is a global hub for Bitcoin mining, driven by cheap power, deregulated markets, and renewable energy access. And so I start digging around, doing research. And long before we ever got a bid, so this is 2021, I had already bought the land. Or right in there I bought the land. And I decided to pull out of the stock market to get ready to build, but to leave 25% of what was then my build budget and put it into Bitcoin mining. Some of it in Texas, some of it international. Quite frankly, it was spread all over the world. I invested in a bunch of different companies and went great at first. I feel like I may have doubled up pretty quickly. I can't quite remember. And then somewhere about 7 months in.
It started early this morning. The Russian assault on Ukraine began with missile attacks on key targets. This was an airport. But across the country, Ukrainians woke to explosions lighting up the dawn sky.
And so this Ukraine thing kicks off, and without getting political, let's just say anything that used up a lot of energy, per se, suddenly became persona non grata. Embroiled in the whole thing was pipelines that supplied natural gas from Russia to Europe. We began supplying a bunch of weapons. And oh, by the way, let's not forget that by November of that year, 6 months after the invasion, maybe 7 months, something like that, 8 even, FTX blows up while I'm at the inaugural Pacific Bitcoin Festival or conference run by Swan, my current Bitcoin exchange of choice, despite their chaos. And Bitcoin's hovering around $20,000. It's literally down 60-75% from where I got in. And the mining is down more than that. So instead of building a house, I have just turned six-figure money into a 1999 Honda Accord with 180,000 miles on it. Poof. Not investment advice. Probably better off investing in the S&P. Definitely would have been better off just buying Bitcoin slowly but surely, which I did a little bit of. But the miners just decimated me, and I had put a big chunk up front. And it was pain. I mean, thankfully at the time I had a real job, but it was real pain. And the dream of building that perfect Airbnb in the mountains was essentially gone. And just when I had given up hope on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, along comes...
So I would particularly like to use it for my English work.
AI, artificial intelligence tools, are increasingly being used by pupils who've gone on...
AI, artificial intelligence. ChatGPT, Grok, Midjourney, Soraya, I think is video one. Gemini, and a host of other application-specific large learning models that are just yearning for two things: major compute power and energy. Two things that Bitcoin mining find themselves right in the middle of. And so, for any of you that have had the pleasure of seeing or hearing a Bitcoin mining operation in person, you'll know that it looks very, very similar to the facilities we call data centers, to the farms where these LLMs train, which are just racks and racks and racks of computers using NVIDIA chips, which is why NVIDIA went through the roof. The big deal was with Core Scientific, a company that had found themselves bankrupt after all the chaos of the first rush into Bitcoin mining in America, when FTX and all that went down, and came out and signed a $1 billion deal with CoreWeave. There are a dozen different companies. And while there hasn't been a second huge deal like the CoreWeave, Core Scientific deal, it really seems like it's only a matter of time. And so I wrote it back up. There are a dozen different companies, like I said, who each have their hand in there. Some are pure play Bitcoin miners still, like CleanSpark and one or two others, but the rest of them are fishing around to get their hands on these AI contracts that are long-term, that are steady. They do have different requirements for uptime, cooling, sometimes availability, I guess you would say. But they're very, very similar. And so I wrote it all the way back up. So let's recap. Miners, and just to give you a sense of their scale, they have these machines that are doing billions of hashes a second of just very specific algorithmic compute power. They capture, develop, and manage these large sites that have access to and sometimes even own power sources. There's somewhere between 2.5 and 8 million rigs scattered around the world. They build the blocks with the transactions inside them that will eventually be placed on the blockchain. And when they do, they get the block reward, which is at this point somewhere 3.125, I believe is the actual number. Plus, there's usually some fees. At this point, it should be noted, the fees are still minuscule. Ultimately, I think any real discussion about this has to point out that if that stays the same way, which I can't imagine it would, but if it did, it would not be feasible, because in 2 more halvings, which is essentially 7 years, the block reward will be less than 1. It goes from 3.125 to whatever half of that is, which is essentially 1.5 plus less than a tenth, less than 1.6. And then it's down to 0.7 something Bitcoin per block reward. And so now they're chasing around these multi-$100 million contracts from the likes of Claude, Meta, Google, Amazon, and anything using massive compute power and data farms to train LLMs. A more consistent form of revenue, less volatility, longer contracts. And the Bitcoin miners find themselves sitting in the catbird seat. Now, I was curious as I dug into this, how much energy? How much energy does it use to mine a Bitcoin? And it was fairly surprising. It uses like 200,000 kilowatt hours, which is, according to Grok, enough energy to power my entire home, which is charging one electric car and heating the house with electricity for 20 years. But here's what's nuts. Here's what's crazy. I use somewhere in the area of about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. My bill is about $400 a month in California, which, considering I do charge a car and heat my house, it's not cheap, but you spend $150 on gas a month, most people, if you fill up your tank a couple times. At least in California, anyway. So let's do a little math. Times 12 is 4,800 times, I think it was 19 years. Let's just say 19, which comes out to $91,200, which is very, very close to where Bitcoin is trading today. And I just want to wrap up my Bitcoin mining saga, my own personal investment, because in and out, and certainly not investment advice, ridiculous what I've done to myself. I could have easily just put this in a dollar cost average Bitcoin buyer S&P and gone on to build a much bigger real estate business than I have, instead of going in and out of these miners, which to date, again, I want to point out, they are playing beat the clock, and the vast, vast, vast majority of them, despite having huge hodl positions, some of them, and incredible businesses, as it stands right now, none of them make any money. I think there's one or two who've shown, and the likes of Iron and one other or a couple other small ones have shown like a quarterly profit more than once. But it's not about my investment saga, which came to a gurgling crunch all over again after riding them back and being back up a little, or keeping pace at least with the S&P. Certainly not Bitcoin itself, but I got to the point where I was close again, and then this latest downturn, and boom, I'm back on my face again, and they went down 50-60%. I was largely exposed, and to top it all off, it happened at a time when I lost a major source of income. Whoopsies. What I'm trying to point out is that this industry sits at the absolute vortex, the epicenter of three of the most important, structurally vital, explosive, theoretically explosive components of the nation's economy. Whether it's for Bitcoin, freedom money, and the base layer of the future financial system, or artificial intelligence, the revolutionary technology that makes almost anything possible to anyone. Or just these electric cars California has mandated we be driving. They're great. But we are gonna have to generate a whole heck of a lot more electricity. And again, right here in California, where we pay very high electricity rates, you'd be remiss if you didn't ask yourself the question, not only who controls the grid, but who is elevating and pushing the electric and power industry forward? Is it Pacific Gas and Electric? Is it Southern California Edison? Are they the innovators of the time? No, they are not. But you know who are innovators? Every single person working in that Bitcoin mining industry. They are desperate to find stranded energy. They are desperate to create low-cost energy. They are the buyers of last resort and first resort for any new projects coming online because they will turn it into digital property or now possibly artificial intelligence. And so we shouldn't demonize it. We should democratize it. We should unleash it. We should utilize it. And right here in California, we should have 100 different Bitcoin power companies vying to create value, to heat your pools, to find stranded energy. To turn that nuclear reactor in the sky into an unlimited source of energy that we can use to make the world a better place. And so, to sum up, there's just no way these miners can find themselves smack dab in the middle of three of the most revolutionary technologies the world has ever seen, being Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, and energy, and not have some of them come away as huge, huge winners, as multi-$100 billion companies are gonna be created. How? Who? I don't know. And doing this episode made me realize I don't know a lot of things about Bitcoin. I'm really sketchy on how this op return hubbub fits into the miners exactly. I don't understand exactly how the filters work or don't work, and if they're actually part of the blockchain or not, or how the miners get around them. Then there's also the centralization question, because the miners are essentially directed to pools where it's very rare that an individual miner gets a block reward. You contribute a certain amount of hash power, and then the centralized mining pools sort of share the Bitcoin rewards. They divvy them up based on the power. And so while I'm sure there'll be some winners, and I'm sure you can both make and lose a lot of money investing in Bitcoin mining, the thing to do is to say thank you for tuning in to another episode. And if you know the answer to some of these questions, reach out. Find me. Hit me up on Twitter or X, whatever it is, at CryptoCabinPod. My DMs are open. Or you can find me on my real estate website at FreddieJHomes.com. And we're going to bring a guest on